don't have a sense of what it's like to be a practitioner until you have a real case that you have to handle. And I learned so much so quickly. It was really a lot of trial by fire and trial by error.
Clinic experience is really indispensable here at Stanford. I mean, you learn a ton in classes, but all of the things that a lawyer does outside of just reading and analyzing the law are things you learn about in clinic and not really anywhere else.
When you're in a class or writing an exam, you might have a fact pattern and you write out the facts and write out the law. And I'll pick this answer, but in real life, there's other consideration.
I was surprised at how rewarding it was to have actual clients, to work with them on a project and deliver a final product, see their reaction to it and see how it affects their business and operations is just a tremendous thing.
Their faces, you see their faces behind this written brief, and you don't ever feel bored or you don't ever feel like your work is insignificant because it's really changing someone's life.
The focus in clinic isn't so much on solely serving clients, it's also really on teaching. And so to a large degree, we would step back a lot from just the end goal of achieving an outcome for a client and talk with our professors or our peers about why we were making certain strategic decisions.
There are a lot of different lawyering skills that you will learn. So, for example, on one of our cases, people are preparing and defending depositions. We have 2 cases that are writing amicus briefs for petitions for cert to the Supreme Court. We obviously have a lot of community engagement because some of our cases are still in their planning phases.
One of the things the clinic does an outstanding job of doing is teaching every one of the students how to become a better writer, because there's really no escaping it in some ways, because not just the professors, but your teammates, your peers are going to hold you accountable.
I was forced to deal with incredibly complex ideas and go through so many drafts, and that by the time I was done with that idea, it had to be, although it was still incredibly complex, it had to be whittled down to a very short, succinct statement.
I got to do a full bench trial in California Superior Court, tried to settle the case. The other side didn't want to settle, and so ultimately we sued and took it to trial and ended up winning.
Being able to have a bit of creativity in terms of project development has been one of the really exciting experiences for me in the clinic. I think being able to sort of take the initiative and sort of look at which types of advocacy paths we think are be most effective is really exciting as a student to have that opportunity.
We pretty much had to do everything. Our supervisor sat next to us, and I think if something was going wrong or if we had a question, she certainly would step in. But you very much feel like this is your client, this is your trial. And at the end of the day, after we went over strategic decisions with Ron and Suzanne, who was a supervising attorney, it was me and Matt's call.
It helps to kind of put into context the things that you've learned in law school so that it's not just a theoretical principle of how you negotiate, but it's an actual practice. One of the most significant things I did in community law clinic was on my housing case, I negotiated directly with the opposite side's lawyer.
Most of the clinical skills you learn are things that you would never get in a class, like how to write an email to opposing counsel, how to, when to draft a letter, a demand letter, when, which kind of litigation strategy do you want to go with? And those are kinds of things you can't learn anywhere else, and so that's why the clinic experience is so valuable.
When I read cases in something like 14th Amendment class, I sort of see how they would impact my clients and my cases in the environmental arena, and I realized that there's patterns in the law I wouldn't have seen before.
One interesting thing about going from class to the clinical experience and then back to class is the 2 complement each other really well, and you get to see how theory runs in practice and then things in practice that make different parts of the classroom experience important.
Clinical experience definitely had a positive effect on my career prospects. I'm going to be doing a clerkship next year, and so in the Ninth Circuit, which is a circuit with a lot of immigration cases. So it was a really great thing for me to be able to talk about with the judge that employed me, that to show him that I had done work on this and that I was really interested in it and that it was a very valuable experience to me.
Clinical education is critically important for young lawyers, and I find among my clerks that the ones who've had clinical education, and particularly a lot of clinical education, have a lot of things that the others don't. For example, I refer to street smarts.
Just the people who come from having done clinics have a broader sense of how the legal system operates. They have some sense of strategy. They have often more sense of how to do persuasive writing as opposed to academic writing.
In a clinic, you have the opportunity to experiment with different styles because you're working under the supervision of a faculty member. And that is different than working under the supervision of a partner in a law firm because you don't have that freedom to experiment.
This environment involves teamwork, it involves problem solving, it involves marshaling resources in a creative way. And so if we see resumes that don't kind of show any evidence of that kind of experience, that person's at a disadvantage in the recruiting process.
I know as a hiring partner, my counterparts at other firms know, the people who work at advocacy groups know, the judges know that the experience that you've had in the clinic gives you such an incredible advantage into understanding the system, understanding the expectations of judges, understanding the expectations of clients, the need for, as I said, detail.
You'll be challenged personally and professionally. You'll be faced with issues where you'll really have to sort of evaluate where your ethical lines are and really identify where your moral compass is in order to make the best decision.
It was probably the best decision I made in law school to go do this clinic. Everything that I did in the clinic is directly applicable to what I will be doing when I go on to work starting in the fall.
You would be missing something significant if you went through law school without doing a clinic. I think that everyone in every different clinic has come out of it, I think, a better lawyer, a better human being, and a better advocate